Throughout history, there have been people who have committed some of the most heinous crimes fathomable. For those crimes, they have been convicted and sentenced to death. Welcome to Death Row Executions, where we take a look into the lives of society's worst offenders. And now, your host, Air.
Peter Thomas Anthony Manuel was born on March 15, 1926 in New York to Scottish parents. He spent the first 5 years of his life in New York before his parents decided to move back home to Motherwell, Scotland in 1931. Growing up, Peter got into a lot of trouble, and as early as 10 years old, he was known in town as a juvenile delinquent. He committed many petty crimes, and his first major crime happened when Peter turned 15 years old, and he was arrested for sexual assault. Peter was short in stature, standing at only 5 feet 4 inches, and he was obsessed with American gangs and the American criminal lifestyle. He began emulating what he saw and read, so there was no rehabilitation or positive change in behavior. When Peter turned 20, he was arrested again for sexual assault, but this time he had to spend 9 years in prison. He served his time at the Peterhead prison in Scotland. After being released from prison in 1953, Peter's parents still accepted him, so he moved in with them in Glasgow, Scotland. Peter tried to hide his criminal past, and he started dating a young woman by the name of Anna O'Hara. The two got along well. They were engaged and set to marry on July 30th, 1955, but as soon as Anna found out about his secret criminal past, she decided to call off the wedding and break up with Peter. The same day Anna broke up with him, Peter was so angered that he took all of his frustration out on a 29-year-old woman by the name of Mary McLaughlin. Peter took her and threatened to kill her, but she was able to escape without being assaulted. It's been documented that Mary was the only victim of Peter's to have ever escaped. The following year, in January of 1956, Peter was working at a golf course as a gas fitter, and on January 2nd, he followed a young woman by the name of Ann Nealons when she was on her way to go golf on one of the courses. Peter assaulted her and then fatally attacked her with an iron bar. Because Peter was a registered sex offender, he was questioned during the investigation, but was never charged because his father agreed to give him an alibi. After his first kill, Peter got busted for burglary, spent time in jail, but was released on bail. Upon his release, he set out to kill again. It was the night of September 17, 1956, when Peter broke into the home of a woman named Marion. Marion's daughter Vivian and her 41-year-old sister were also in the house sleeping in their beds when Peter went to each room and fatally shot them all. The only person who was assaulted before they were killed was Vivian. Unfortunately, Marion's husband William was the only suspect because he claimed to have been away fishing at the time of the murders, and he was charged with killing 3 of his loved ones. Fortunately for him, although he did lose his family, he was released from jail due to lack of evidence. After that incident, Peter was busted again for burglary, but was caught and sentenced to 18 months in prison. He served approximately 14 months out of the 18-month sentence and was released in November of 1957. The following month after his release from prison, Peter went on to kill again. He said that he was looking for work and met a 36-year-old taxi driver by the name of Sidney Dunn. It was December 9th, 1957, in Newcastle, when Peter shot and killed Mr. Dunn for unknown reasons. Peter was a suspect for this kill and for his previous kills, but when another family in the area was shot while he was locked up in prison, they thought the suspect could be someone else. Peter got away with murder again, which left him on the loose to kill again. The next murder took place on December 28, 1957, when Peter assaulted and killed a young woman by the name of Isabel Cook. Isabel was waiting for her boyfriend at a bus stop in the hopes of attending a school dance with him, but unfortunately she was not able to make it to that dance. Peter killed her and then took her body to a nearby field and buried her. Her body was never found, and there were never any leads to her disappearance until Peter was captured at a later date and confessed. Just a few days later, on January 1st, 1958, Peter broke into the Smart family home where Peter, Doris, and Michael Smart lived with their house cat. Peter killed the whole family and stayed in their house for a full week, living off of the food already in the home. He used cash he found in the house and even took care of the cat while he was there. He was using Peter Smart's car during the week, and on one particular day he gave a ride to a police officer who was in the area looking into the disappearance of Isabel. Peter was able to have a conversation with this police officer, and he told the officer that he believed that everyone was looking in the wrong places, and after dropping the officer off, Peter ditched the car. He then stole some of Peter Smart's new banknotes and started using them around town. In mid-January, Peter was using a banknote at a bar, and the bartender notified the police. The notes were traced to Peter Smart, and they were able to arrest Peter. Investigators realized they had a serial killer on the loose, and once Peter was questioned, he confessed to killing 8 people, but he was charged on January 13, 1958 for killing 7 people. While being interrogated, he confessed to killing Isabel Cook and led police to her body. His trial was held at the Glasgow High Court, and Mr. Justice Cameron was presiding over the case. Peter was initially represented by 3 legal aides, Harold Leslie, W.R. Grieve, and A.M. Morrison. After 9 days of trial, he dismissed them all and ended up representing himself. He tried pleading not guilty by reason of insanity. He also said that his confessions were coerced and should be dismissed. His efforts failed, and after just 2.5 hours of deliberation, he was found guilty of 7 murders in May of 1958 and was sentenced to death by method of hanging. Peter was set to be executed on June 19th, but he had an appeal that was scheduled for June 24th and 25th, so his execution had to be rescheduled. His appeal was denied, and his new execution date was scheduled for July 11th, 1958. Peter spent his time on death row at the Barlinnie prison in Glasgow, and it's been said that while in his cell, he played up the insanity act. He refused to talk to anyone, and he would spend his time listening to a radio that he was given. He was allowed to have visitors, and his most frequent visitor was a Catholic priest by the name of Father Smith. One of his most poignant visits was when Peter received a visit from his mother Bridget. She came to visit one day while Father Smith was in the cell with him, and she noticed that Peter's behavior was not normal. He continued to fake being crazy, but his mother was not able to handle it. She got angry, slapped him, and yelled out, "You can't fool me." It was time for his execution day, and prison officials went to get him at around 8 o'clock in the morning. His visit from his mom meant something because he started talking again, and had even asked the guards to turn up the radio so he could go quietly. He was hooked up in under 10 seconds, and he was pronounced dead in under 25. Peter was buried in an unmarked grave within the prison grounds, and Father Smith officiated his burial service. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Death Row Executions, and I have a quick question for you guys. So in this story, we know that Peter was guilty of murder and his father gave him an alibi. I also think about his mother who got angry at him in prison and said, "You can't fool me." If you were a parent and you had a child who murdered, would you go along with them pretending to be crazy? Also, if you have a child who is constantly committing petty crimes, would you give them an alibi knowing that they are guilty?